Thank you for all coming out. So first off, I would like to acknowledge that this rally takes place on unceded and traditional territories of the Lekwungen communities, Saanich, and Esquimalt First Nations. So thank you. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Reform the Vote Victoria Rally and this National Day of Action on Electoral Reform across Canada. We are here today to show support for reforming our electoral systems, both federally and provincially, so that we can actually have a democracy that mirrors the wills of Canadians and is able to adapt to the difficulties we will face as a nation together in the future. I personally participated in the Committee on Electoral Reform's public consultations. I even filled out the broken and inadequate mydemocracy.ca survey. And I went to Marianne Monsef's public consultations as well in Victoria, all while thinking that the 1,813 times we were promised electoral reform was sincere and that we would actually have change in this country and our votes would matter. Sadly, Trudeau broke that promise, and we as Canadians and citizens of the world must hold him and his party accountable for such blatant, empty posturing. We heard from Canadians of all walks of life, and the overwhelming majority favored a proportional representation system. We have consensus. Now it's time to walk the talk, Trudeau, and give Canadians the right to a bright future that we deserve where our votes matter.
The promise was clear, and we all know it by heart. 2015, let's say it together, 2015 will be the last election held under first past the post. And why? Because we want to make sure that every vote counts. This was a clear promise, and it included the details of how we would get there. Within 18 months of forming government, Justin Trudeau said, my government will table legislation before Parliament for electoral reform. So everything's going along. We had some delays getting started. We finally got the committee established and working in late June of last year, 2016. We traveled 31,000 kilometers, 12 MPs representing 5 parties. We worked extremely hard, but that's not the point that we worked hard. Canadians believed in the promise and came out by the thousands. In fact, over 20,000 Canadians filled out a very, not particularly user-friendly, but extremely detailed survey that we, all 12 MPs, signed off on that would actually find out what Canadian voters wanted. This was not the mydemocracy.ca thing that was very fuzzy. The NDP worked well with others on that committee. And believe it or not, so did the Conservatives, so did the Bloc, but even the 4 Liberals who filed their own dissent from our recommendation of the majority that we should move to proportional representation, even the 4 Liberals in their dissent could not bring themselves to endorse preferential or ranked ballot because all the evidence was against it. Even they could not endorse the system you wanted because it's the only system on the evidence that gives more distorted results than first past the post. So now he's also saying that in the interest of national unity, we can't have proportional representation. I'm sure you've all seen the unity crisis that has plagued New Zealand since they grasped mixed member proportional. The only country on earth where the Indigenous members of the House of Commons in New Zealand exactly equal the proportion of Indigenous people across New Zealand. We believed you, Justin. I know when you made that promise, I'm going to say this out loud, I know when you made that promise, you intended to keep it. It's not too late to admit that you made a mistake. You can fix this, we can fix this, Parliament can fix this, and Canadians must not stop saying to the top of our voices as loudly as we can, Justin Trudeau, keep your promise, give us fair voting. Thank you.
Thanks for being out here today on what is obviously the most fundamental political issue of our time. And so I was particularly disappointed, and I couldn't get all 1,000 promises on a card, but I got one here, one comment from the Prime Minister. Here's what he said in his own words. Now that Canadians have a government they are more satisfied with, the motivation to want to change the electoral system is less compelling. Has dismissed the hard work of hundreds of thousands of Canadians on this issue. He's dismissed the hard work of the committee, Elizabeth May, Nathan Cullen, and all the other members of that committee. But more than that, he's dismissed the hard work of hundreds of thousands of Canadians who participated in this process in good faith, expecting the promise to be kept. Secondly, he's now pushing the fear button. He's starting to say that somehow proportional representation, again, as Elizabeth said, will drive us to extremism, will split the country up, when everybody who paid any attention knows it's proportional representation that leads toward compromise, that leads toward moderation, and that leads toward making every vote count rather than alienating people from the system. The third thing, and I'm going to be very blunt about this, is there's a new phenomenon I think we're seeing, and it's called, rather than the glass ceiling for women, it's the glass cliff. And so when it's time to do particularly dangerous and dirty political work, rather than taking responsibility yourself as the Prime Minister, you take a woman and stick her out in front and make her walk the plank for you. Particularly shameful. The first one may have been voluntary, the second one wasn't. And the last thing that I really want to say about this is it is a broken promise by the Prime Minister, and I'm going to echo Elizabeth on this. There's nothing more fundamental than a promise, and I should have brought 1,800 cards, a promise that was restated so many times, was so fundamental to the outcome of the election, and was so fundamental to the future of this country. So thank you for being out today. They are presuming Canadians don't care, and they are presuming Canadians will forget. And so it's up to all of us to let them know that Canadians care. And when it comes to by-elections, we've got 5 coming up, let's make sure this is a really big issue in those by-elections. And when it comes to the next election, I trust all of you will remind your neighbors not to forget this promise. Thank you.
We're not going to get electoral reform unless we work together across the country. And it started in Newfoundland this morning, Lead Now, and 60 other organizations are pulling together with Fair Vote Canada. And we're campaigning across the country today on this day of protest, fighting for electoral reform. And it doesn't matter if you're Green or NDP or Federal Liberal, which I am. We still believe in this cause, electoral reform, and the time for change. Now, there are many Federal Liberals here. You can see them in their red outfits. All of the red people here are Federal Liberals. And we're just as disappointed as you are that this has happened in our country where we've had an electoral promise. We've worked hard. I knocked on doors on this issue. And yet we haven't made it over the top. So what do we do now? Cross the floor, we could cross the floor, or what else can we do? Fight from within, and it's time to keep fighting. What we're doing in Fair Vote Canada is we're setting up protests across the country, but we have to do more than protest. As Randall said rightly just now, we also need to move from protest to power to policy, and that means getting involved in the political processes, getting involved in this upcoming provincial election, getting involved in nomination meetings, getting involved in knocking on the doors, and doing the hard work it takes to bring electoral reform. And all of you here, it's great. Many of you are political activists. I recognize your faces, not just from the Federal Liberals, but from other parties. And we need to bring in our friends and our family to knock on doors with us and fight for electoral reform. There are lots of proportional representation supporters inside the Liberal Party. Joyce Murray, right? Vancouver Quadra, and Nathan Erskine-Smith in Toronto. There's a core of people who really still believe in this. And what we're saying as Federal Liberals who believe in proportional representation, let's stick together. Let's fight for this. We're going to fight for it from within the Federal Liberal Party. We haven't won this time, but we are going to continue that fight.
I want to acknowledge David Merner's courage in speaking out today. I have a lot of respect for this man and got to know him through work with Fair Vote Canada. and I know that his heart is aching. Like, it took him a few days to decide whether he could get here today. And he's been incredibly dedicated to the cause of PR, and as a member of Fair Vote Canada's National Council, allies like him are priceless, and we'll need to win over many Liberal MPs in the coming year. So let's remember that. But I speak today as an ordinary citizen who cares passionately about democracy. And I want to share with you my letter, which was published in the Times Colonist last Sunday, in the hope it will encourage you to write your own letter. Quote, I'm appalled that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has abdicated his promise to make 2015 the last election under first past the post. And the thing that really excites me is that Fair Voting BC, and I think all the allies, will support a charter challenge. Canada's charter guarantees our right to vote and our right to equal treatment. But only when half of us have an MP we support. The system is discriminatory and excludes our voices. And constitutional lawyers say we have a good case. So this is going to be a crucial strategy. Pledge your support. Go to charterchallenge.ca. And finally, don't forget to vote on May 9 for a party that has principles and won't betray us. BC has the strongest record of all provinces in wanting electoral reform. 58% of us voted in favor of a single transferable vote in the referendum in 2005. And if we'd won, we likely would not be facing Kinder Morgan, the Site C Dam, and LNG plants, would we? No. I'm tired of the constant headbutting with government about environmental issues. Are you? Yes. And tackling one issue at a time is exhausting. We need systemic change that gives every voter a voice in the corridors of power.
The difficulty that we're faced with provincially, it was mentioned the 58% result in 2005. What was not mentioned was the 40% result in 2009. Now, there are a number of reasons why that may have happened. The provincial government didn't support it in the same way with information like they did in 2005. There was a yes and no campaign that were actually funded by government that muddied the water. There were prominent voices seen to be representing the NDP and even the Greens, who didn't particularly like STV, who were speaking out against it. So it was confusing from a number of perspectives. Nevertheless, the result was still 40%. And so we are hung up on that contrary result, and that's why we're proposing that we need a voter mandate to move ahead. Now, here's some thoughts, though, about how to win that referendum. First of all, and I can be clear about this and unequivocal, I'll be giving my blood later. 50% plus one should be the threshold to win any referendum in British Columbia. And that's a commitment I can make, that John Horgan makes, 50% plus one. So that's the most important thing. We would in fact have a PR system now if that rule had been adopted in 2005. So that's one way that we can establish winning conditions, let's say. The second issue, of course, is what's the question? We're not, the official opposition, we're not wedded to a particular system. We are very clear, though, that it's proportional representation we're talking about, not this alternative vote or ranked ballot, which in fact gives even less proportional results than the current first past the post.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all coming out. I represent a small party, apparently, but a party that will lead British Columbia to form government in 2017. Just watch. We are a party based on principles. We have 6 guiding principles in our party, and one of them is proportional representation. I'm here today to tell you that we will not hold a referendum. We will do it because it is who we are. We believe in proportional representation, we'll campaign on proportional representation, and there will be a referendum. It is on May the 9th. Because if you want it, there is one party in this province that will follow through on that promise and ensure that this truly is the last election in BC that is done by first past the post. More than that, while I recognize that we're talking about the federal system, and I have hope that Trudeau will recognize that there is a ground surge of support for first past the post, and he will change his mind, because strong leadership, principled leadership, is one where you stand by your commitments and you're willing to admit that you were wrong. He was wrong in this decision. It's a matter of trust, too.